Three, two, one. Warning, the Warriors were all about truth and reality and facts, no matter how tough to hear. Our goal is always education, prevention, intervention, critical analysis, dissection about human rights crimes and landscape in America, and especially things revolving around missing kids, exploitation of children. You are in for a treat today. Jennifer Coffindaffer joins us. And let me tell you a little bit about Jen, a little bit because her bio is so extensive, but we'll have everything in the body of the video. Jen is a retired FBI agent who specialized in gangs, narcotics, and organized crime. And she's the host of the podcast, Break the Case, with Jen Coffindaffer, FBI, where she peels back the layers of true crime with expert guests and always has an eye on protecting victims and survivors and looks for justice to be served. You can follow Jen on X at Coffindaffer FBI. And again, we'll have all the information for the podcast and everything else in the body of the video. Jen, Happy New Year. Welcome back to the Warriors.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me. You know I love your show and we could talk forever.
Thank you. And we will. There's crime all the time. I love your critical analysis. I love all of the tweets you put out. I mean, it's just so good, Jen. I could just gush about you all day, but let's get down to business around here. I'm gonna ask you thoughts on, answer please any way you feel fit. What do you think about all this going on right now? Being, a member of the FBI, whether you're ex or current, I'm just going to say always a member, maybe in my mind, with all of the migrant roundups, raids, whatever you want to call them, thoughts?
Lynn, I couldn't be more happy to see what's happening. And this is why. Years and years of working in the Houston division, a decade down there, and working in Texas for 20 years, I can tell you that the immigration situation is critical because of the importation of drugs like fentanyl and other drugs that are really killing our young, killing our youth. In addition, human trafficking that occurs at the border and that persists in through the United States due to this trafficking issue. In addition, the illegal immigrants that are coming in completely unvetted. And this would include terrorists. This includes criminals, rapists, individuals who are violent actors. And why would we do anything but not want them to be removed, put in prison, and then ultimately sent back to their countries? This is a no-brainer and to me nonpartisan.
Excellent, Jen, because I don't understand Americans defending these criminals. I just, that's another program. I really don't get it. But you touched on something I want to go over. Describe for us what is terrorism. And I mean that because a lot of people don't really understand what that really means.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. So particularly when we're talking about international terrorism, we're talking about individuals that are willing to use violence to instill terror into a community, into a society for typically a religious motivation. So those are the types of terrorist elements that personally most concerned about crossing over the borders. It's been so long since 9/11 that so many people really don't understand what happened and the illegal immigration that was involved in that, and how these individuals took their ideals and became educated enough to take over planes and to fly them into our towers, and so much more that occurred. And you don't want to have a porous border where more of these people with these maniacal jihadist philosophies can cross easily into our borders and cause those types of events.
Jen, don't you think the entire United States is kind of one big border? Because I'm here in New York State and we have, Canada, New York. We don't talk about that a lot, but I've heard so many illegals coming over that border. San Diego, we work with immigration attorneys who, their clients have been so upset. They're working 7, 8, 9 years to come here legally, into our country. And then they see all of this and that's just wide open. They're driving in little boats, nice little boats into La Jolla and areas and just getting out and walking up the sand. And I feel like really, and we've heard it before, all the states are a border state at this point. So would you agree with that?
I would agree because of what happened over the last several years in terms of really the government facilitating illegal aliens. And I say that word, I'm not trying to be derogatory, in all legal paperwork that FBI agents use, that all government and police officials use. The word is illegal alien to refer to somebody entering this country that did not do it legally. That's the word. So I just want everybody to know I'm not trying to say they're a Martian. I'm trying to say the legal terminology so we're all on the same page. And with the transportation and the facilitation of these individuals being bused, being flown to country or to states and capitals and cities all throughout the United States, you're exactly right. The border has now infiltrated the heart of America.
Oh, you open up so many questions, but I want to ask, I just want to point out, I was waiting one time to get on an airplane in a very nice airport, and everything has always, I use the same airline, very organized all the time. And all of a sudden, this whole group showed up, and they were all men too. Could have been teen boys. I couldn't really tell the ages, young men, teen boys, literally pushed people out of where you line up to, walk into the plane. And they were allowed to do that. And I just remember thinking, that was a few months ago. And I remember thinking, why is anybody allowing this type of behavior? I literally got pushed to the side so they could go on first. And I thought, why? No other country would allow any of this, in my opinion.
Well, it was definitely sanctioned at the mid levels and highest levels of our government, really. And it's being reversed now. And I'm so happy to see this. Like I said, this is not about individuals who have been here for decades, who were trying, the dreamers, as they're referred to, that truly came here and have thrived here. And I think there does need to be a road for them. It's not that that is the issue at hand. The issue at hand is, what are we going to do with the criminal element of illegal aliens that are here to get them incarcerated and to serve for the crimes they've committed and to make sure they don't commit any other crimes in our country? That's the issue at hand, Lynn.
Yeah. I do know the Lake and Riley Act, I believe today or tomorrow or shortly, will be signed by the president at any moment. And the Warriors, we fully support that. So, being here in New York City, I've seen too many things, and I'm going to leave it at that. So that's a good piece of news, as well as getting rid of these criminals. It's a great news. I want to go now into talking about kids a little bit. You do a great job on your X account of really focusing on a lot of missing kids, or what happened to them, or where somebody knows something, where are some answers. I have to start with, because this particular child, it really does haunt me, Jen, is Sebastian Rogers. I think somebody somewhere knows something. What do you think? Tell us about that case.
I 100% think that too. It will be February 25th, will be a year since Sebastian Rogers was seen. At that time, he was only 15 years old. He's autistic on the spectrum, although very high functioning. The information is that he literally walked out of his home somewhere between midnight and 6 in the morning, shoeless, in freezing cold temperatures in Tennessee, with only a flashlight, and has never been seen since. And by all accounts, never been seen on any camera, never been seen by any person since the night of the 25th at the Texas Roadhouse, when he had dinner with his mom, and then a dash cam video audio of the mother showing that he indeed made it home. So with all those details, no one disappears, Lynn. You know that. And certainly an autistic child would not, in a neighborhood where there was camera after camera after camera, just disappear. So something happened to that child.
Do you want to go any further? Do you think something happened in the home, or you just want to leave it? Or, it's just so shocking to me. Kids are, we have approximately 2,300 kids a day in America. I mean, some are runaways, some are sex and labor trafficked. Some kids just disappear. Jen, that's like so shocking to me, that this amount of kids, whether they're a runaway or they're just disappeared.
It's amazing. This case reminds me a little bit of the Michael Vaughn case from a couple of years ago up in Fruitland. In that particular case, again, the child just walked away and disappeared. And now, of course, it's believed that a neighbor that just lived a few houses down abducted the child, killed the child, Michael Vaughn, and buried them in their backyard. Since then, we've actually had the person that knew about this come out and give a videotaped confession to a degree about what their spouse did. He says he didn't do it, but that the spouse did it. So nevertheless, unfortunately, that home was searched, the house was dug up, and they never found the remains. Likely, I believe, because over this long time frame, they were, of course, moved. That's what I believe, since the time the spouse knew about it. But it reminds me of that, to my point, that I just don't think that child made it out of that neighborhood without something happening to him prior to being out of the neighborhood, or after he left the neighborhood, something terrible happening to him.
Jen, what I love about a lot of your tweets, X's, whatever we're calling them these days, is you do like follow up. Because I feel like a lot of stories come and go within like 24, 48 hours. And I'll always be like, well, what about that child? Like a few months later, maybe we should be following up on that one, kind of thing. And already, everybody's on to the next case they're on to. But we have to do better. And you do an excellent job in doing this, in keeping up, talking about as much as we can these cases, just in case somebody decides to come forward, or somebody decides they're getting a divorce and they're gonna use some information, because it's just so, I keep saying shocking. I truly am shocked that people aren't out. I'm in New York City protesting in Times Square. Like, where are all the missing kids? We demand answers. Where are those reported 500,000 plus unaccompanied minors from the border? Seriously, where are they? Well, they're somewhere here. And that's in addition to all our kids that are missing. So just millions. So it just seems like, wow. But you do a good job in keeping up on things. I want to ask you about two cases that you've really have done good analysis on. And I have to ask you about this Bryan Kohberger. I can't keep up with it. Now, what's happening with him, with all of this?
So Bryan Kohberger, we're at a very interesting time for people who love legalese and who love to be in the courtroom, and at a very boring time for people who are just saying, can we please just get to trial? But basically, we're going over motions. And what specifically I think is bothersome to many people, including myself, is that this is round two. Every motion we are hearing now, which particularly they're fighting over whether the DNA is going to be allowed. You may recall Bryan Kohberger has been charged with killing 4 college students in Idaho, and his DNA was found on a knife sheath of a K-bar knife that was below Maddie Mogen, one of the victims. And they're basically fighting about whether that DNA is going to be allowed in. The reason is they're saying it was genetic genealogy that was used to find Bryan Kohberger. And that's all true. They had DNA, but it didn't match to anybody in CODIS, which is the national database for DNA. In other words, nobody that had been arrested. And so they used the 23andMe and to find him. I shouldn't say it was 23andMe. It could have been one of the others, but where people want to find out what their nationality is. And in this case, they were able to link that DNA to Bryan Kohberger's father, knowing that it was going to be a relative of Bryan Kohberger's father. They then went to a trash can. They found Bryan Kohberger's DNA, and it was a match up to the octillion degree, which is more people than obviously are even in this world. So that is what they're discussing. They've already discussed this, though, before, Lynn, because what happened was this all went through all these machinations under a judge called John Judge. Literally, he was Judge. And he then decided to have venue changed to make sure they could get a fair trial, and moved it out of Moscow, Idaho, where the crime took place, and moved it to Boise. Well, when he did that, he also retired. So now we have a brand new judge, Judge Hippler, in Boise, Idaho. And this judge is good. He is not putting up with any shenanigans, but he has to hear everything all over again. So literally every point that was argued before, Lynn, they're arguing it again. And that DNA is the number one point of contention right now.
And I always thought, Jen, I remember saying to this, it could have been to you, it could have been a year ago. They demolished that house where
Oh,
all of the, and I remember, and I'm not a lawyer or like in law enforcement, but I remember thinking, well, they said it was an eyesore reminder for other students in the neighborhood and other people, but I thought it was a crime scene, the house, but they knocked it down.
yeah, I'll never, that is one thing I will never understand. And again, the prosecution and defense both agreed that they were fine with that. But will always say, like in the Murdaugh case and many, many other cases, if you can go and visit that crime scene, jurors love to do that. They want to understand because there's no way. For instance, if you go to buy a house and you look on the house video tour, it sure does look different when you get there. The
Right.
ceilings are lower. You can hear echoing. What could he have heard or seen looking around a hallway? Remember, some of the best evidence in this case is the next door neighbor's ring cam and what was heard on that. You want to be able to see, gosh, outside, can I hear the people clumping around inside? There's so much to glean from that house. And how can you really see the blood and other things that might have trickled, a piece of hair, a piece of sweat that might have trickled between the boards? Did they really get everything? Look at what happened in the LISC, the Long Island serial killer case, experiment. They searched that house. They had backhoes and everything else out there searching. And guess what? They missed a ton of stuff because he had it all hidden. Thank God they didn't destroy that house because they were able to go back, do a new search warrant, and find information that implicated him in other murders. So it's just shocking to me that they knocked it down. I'll never agree with that, Lynn.
That Long Island case is very strange, Jen. I mean, architect in New York City by day and seems to be alleged mass murderer by night. Like, how could he do all that? I and nobody, I don't know, talked about it. But
Yeah,
we'll leave that. It's a very strange
but
case going on. Let me ask you something. How do you feel as an expert and your years of expertise in FBI, and you're an expert witness in a lot of these crime trials, that the public now, everybody seems to be a crime expert? People are really kind of jumping on board. Do you think that's because the internet allows this now? Do you think it's just an overall fascination with crime? Like, you've seen the transition over a couple of decades, I guess, with crime, how it's all unraveling. You have any thoughts on any of that?
Well, I think from putting an FBI hat on, if I were still an agent, I retired back in 2016, as you know, after 28 years of service. But if I had to be an agent in this day and time, it would be maddening. Because you would want to keep up and at least look at what's happening online. Because I will say, some of these sleuths find some interesting clues. And, but for these sleuths, Gabby Petito may have never been found. The buffoons, over information, and, saw the van and recalled it from something they viewed. So I find it's a double-edged sword. Some of these individuals are truly good-hearted and they're trying to find information, and they actually do a very good job with it. The problem I have, of course, is with the YouTube creators and other social media personalities, that it's really all about the money. It's all about their fame or getting a moment in the sun. And it's at the expense of victims and people who are dead and deceased. And it's sickening to me to watch how they try to shift a narrative, typically in a conspiratorial way, so that they can get the biggest following. It's horrible to watch.
And Jen, if one more person asks me, because I live by the Hudson River, where do you remember they brought in the ship, the Comfort, during COVID to
Yes.
Howard? And then people started calling me up and writing to me. Is it true there are tunnels from the ship underground up the West Side Highway into Central Park? I mean, I basically don't answer anybody, but it's things like that where if that effort and thinking process could be put in actually some concrete stuff, we could get somewhere with some stuff. I can't tell you how many times I heard that, Jen, though. Like just people kept contacting me, tell me it's true, tell me it's true. And you know me, I run away from that kind of stuff. I'm no, no. Um, Let me ask
Stay
you
away.
about one other. No, I mean really. One other case that this Karen Reed case.
Mhm.
Now, tell me about that because so many people, I don't know, her bumper had DNA on it. Then she's saying the police are framing. What's going on with that case and where's it going?
I think if anyone really looks back at this case from the beginning, her defense counsel, who still is one of her defense counsels, said this did not happen on purpose. There was no, reason for her to do this. This is an accident. This is something that wasn't purposeful. And if you just look back at that footage alone, which I've got on my Twitter, in fact, not only his discussion on the courtroom stairs, but in the courtroom where he tries to, mitigate her actions. That tells everybody a little bit what they need to know. That combined with her admissions on national television on 2 different networks. Yes, I think I clipped him, but and in fact, in one she says, but he didn't look like he was mortally wounded. I really challenge everybody to look at that. I've posted it many times. It's a Dateline clip. And she admitted it to the workers that were there, to, when I say the workers, the EMS workers, to friends of John O'Keefe's. She called one at 5 a.m. when supposedly she hadn't even been there, saying that he died. She self-admits to all of this. How this ever got spun into a third-party culprit defense is mind-boggling to anyone who has followed this case. Forensically, Lynn, we have his DNA on the taillight. We have, I'm going to call them microscopic because you can't really see them clearly without a microscope, pieces of the taillight embedded in his shirt from the thrust of the crash. You have the information from the vehicle, the SUV she drove, showing it going into reverse at a high rate of speed. We have taillight fragments all over the yard that, everybody is trying to say was planted. You would have to have 12 individuals that were at that house that night, all in on this conspiracy to frame Karen Reed, plus about 7 agencies and all these individual lab experts and police personnel to believe she was framed. How this has happened is mind-boggling to me, to be honest.
Not only that, what a waste of resources that we could be using for, I don't know, finding the missing kids. I'm back to
Yeah.
that, Jen. But seriously, because that's the number one thing I hear from law enforcement or agencies, organizations, like we don't have the resources. We don't have the man or woman power to keep up with that. But wow, all of these cases we're talking about seems, except for Sebastian Rogers, what a waste of a lot of resources here. Anything right now that you're focusing on, a case that we should know about? Any other cases that are looking interesting?
Well, it's interesting because you named what I would say are my top 3 cases that every week, and sometimes more than once a week, I follow up on, and certainly on my show, Break the Case, that I also speak on all 3 of those cases quite a lot.
Yes.
But as far as new cases, there is a case that I've really been trying to promote that is actually an old case, but speaks to an old problem that remains a problem. And this is a young girl. Her name was Kim Moreau. Now, she disappeared back in 1985. So people might say, well, Jennifer, come on, it's 1985. What are we ever going to do? but there's strong information, and there's only one person that remains that is likely responsible for her death and that would know where the remains are. In fact, there was a plea deal that was supposed to be worked out, Lynn, where they were going to give up her remains if they would retract some drug charges. But anyway, that didn't end up going through. And the reason I'm focused on this case a little bit right now is because of all the times that young girls, 15, 16, 17, are reported missing, and law enforcement treats them like they're just missing on their own.
Yes.
And they're runaways, and we don't care. And, I bleed blue, but I will never agree with the way that oftentimes law enforcement ignores these young girls because they're in danger when they leave that house. And when they're not back in 48 hours, it's a huge red flag that something horrible could happen. So I'm trying to highlight this old case to highlight a current problem.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight it as well and help you with that, because I have to ask you, Jen. So that's the thing. They say, these kids are a runaway, and then you lose that precious time. We just had the case here out of Long Island, Frank Gervasi with his daughter Emma Ray,
Yes.
and I spoke to him. I was connected through a mutual friend, and he just said he wasn't waiting for anything. They would not help. I mean, there had been some problems in the background anyway. She's 14 years old, but that's no excuse, which we hear a lot. They're a problem kid, they're a runaway. Let it, right? Especially if they have a record of maybe running away in the past or getting involved in any kind of trouble. Do you think that'll ever change? I don't know. Does it go town by town, state by state? Are there any laws for that? Or is it just up to the law enforcement to make that decision? Because I hear this constantly over and over again. We got to wait 24 hours. And then it becomes, parents will say, or family members, then it became 48, it became 72 hours, and they lost all that time.
I'm going to go back to something you asked about earlier, and that's the social media sleuths and this run on social media when it comes to true crime. And I'll say in this regard, I think it's very helpful. This is what could change how law enforcement responds to these young women who go missing, because the citizenry has had it with that, with the kind of marginalization of these young girls. And I'm so glad to see that because they need to take note right away. And I'm very familiar with Gervasi. I actually spoke to him, and he was going to go on the show, but then he called me and he said, "Oh my gosh, I found my daughter." I said, "Well, let me know how." He says she's on a boat. And I said, "Oh, wow." And then, that was the end of it. That was actually in a text. And then, of course, we saw everything that happened, which thankfully he found her. And Lord knows all the horrible circumstances. I know she was in counseling last. I had interfaced with him. But again, as you said, somebody else who's just, law enforcement says, "Oh, we'll look for her when we can." And, unfortunately, it does take the parents truly stepping up, hiring private investigators if your child goes missing.
Yeah, that's what I hear. If you hire private investigators, you're so much more likely to get a lead or get your child back. But we know, Jen, most people really can't hire like private investigators to do any of that. So that's where I have a problem with, how do we help them? What would be some of, as we finish up, what would be some of your, what should we call them? Safety tips or crime tips that you want the warriors, you want the public to know or focus on, or should they encounter something or think they do, like what should they do? Give us some information about that, because people are always like, well, what should I do? Or nobody will listen to me. Or give us your expertise on this with the public.
Okay, I'm going to start with, and I think it's still answering your question, but I'm going to start with, if you have a child between the age of 11 and 18, it is so critical you are involved in their life. That you are, I don't want to call it a helicopter mom, because this is much different than that. That you are monitoring their social media, that you are monitoring their movements. I had little trackers to put on their cars. because the cell phone isn't necessarily where the person is, and the car necessarily isn't, but it'll at least get you. And it's not, I had great kids, but you know what? It's just a time in their life where they
Yeah.
need to know you are there. So I'll say that, number one. Secondarily is starting to notice anomalies. In other words, where your child is acting very normal and what you would expect, and then all of a sudden they're doing things like not turning in their homework. They're
Yes.
not where they're supposed to be. They're missing practices now. Things like that. Those are huge red flags that something is happening. And like I said, even though your kids say they don't want you involved, deep down, they really do. They want to know you care and you love them. So I think that just starting there would significantly reduce the amount of instances we have like this. And then once you get the notification, I mean, once they didn't show up, it's at that immediate time. Don't wait till the morning. In other words, they were supposed to be home at 10 and it's 11, and then now you fall asleep. No, no, no. At 10 o'clock, you go out, get in your car, and you track them down. Also, know all of the numbers of their friends. Every place they go, everything they do, you really have to be like a little detective for about 6 years of your kid's life if you're concerned about, keeping them safe through getting into college.
And beyond, Jen, I'll tell you. it's a different it's a different world. They may not be under our roof, but no, because it's, you know what, and it's not, we are never trying to scare people. We're
No,
we're telling the reality. We're telling the facts. It's a different kind of world. We've got the internet, right? It's just a whole new thing, and we just need to step up. And I'm so glad you gave that information because we work with focus groups, and the kids really, even if they're a teen that's out of control, eventually, when we wear them down, they want attention. You know, they're acting like that because they're looking for the attention. I know it's easy to say if you have a mom that's working all day and trying to pay bills and then comes home to chaos, but like we have to focus on they're acting out for a reason. And basically, I don't know how to do this, Jen, but I don't how we can all step up to help other people. It's kind of a tough one, almost impossible to look out for our neighbors, but I don't know. I just know we have to do something better with kids, because we don't blame parents. We're not judging or anything. There's just so much going on, and they're so busy trying to survive and just pay bills. Because we work with a lot of families, and a lot of single moms, single dads. Do you have any thoughts? Because I'm always trying to find sort of an answer to that one. There's parental autonomy, so you can't just go and start taking care of somebody else's child. But I guess you can be eyes and ears, or you pointed out, use the internet, share pictures of missing children. Like everybody can do something. We must. So
well,
any tips? Because I'm really always searching for something.
Lynn, I'm glad you said that because I certainly would never want to blame the parents, when a child does go missing. But it is about, I think, networking. Do you remember that saying, it takes a village to raise
Yes, of course.
and
It's
that's
true. It's true.
gotten away from a little bit, right? I had a village, that's for sure, where we all looked out for each other. And when one had to work later, because we were two parents that were working, we helped out others when we could. They helped out us. It was definitely a village that helped look out for each other, whether it came to transportation or, hey, can they come over right after school? Or my gosh, I have to work late. Can you do the pickup? And it really does take networking and a village.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we've gotten away from that, I think, because of social media in a sense, right? Everybody's on their phone and doing this, but you're not talking to your neighbors. You're not talking to the parents of the children that go to school with your kids because everything is so much on. So I think it really means interacting and getting that good group of other parents to help with your village, to help with these situations and to keep an eye out, like you said.
Yeah, I think it's imperative today. And I just want to leave this one fact. I was interviewing, she's a survivor of sex trafficking as a child into her teenage years until she became too old at 14 to be in demand. And Jen, she was telling me, and she wrote a book about it. She was the straight A student. She was home every night. So she was one of three girls. Her parents, she was the middle one, never had to worry about her. She went to school every day. Little did they know on weekends when they thought she was going to her best friend's house, she said about a block away, her mom would say, sure, just, go to Becky's house. And that's where she was sex trafficked. But because she was a straight A student, slept in her own bed during the week, was, ideal child. Like, she said her mother and father never called Becky's parents to check up. She was actually there. I just throw that tip out because I never really thought of that when somebody is, you don't check on your children when they go to a sleepover. So I would just throw in, check on your children. If they say they're going to a sleepover, even if they're a straight A student or a great kid, because I'm hearing a lot of those stories, especially lately coming up, just kids you think are fine and they're doing what they're supposed to do and they're good in the home and they're good at school and they're actually being sex trafficked unbeknownst to mothers and fathers and family members. I don't know if you're hearing anything about that.
Yeah, no, that definitely goes on. And I know what you're saying, Lynn, is sometimes when you do have that child that is so easy and one less thing to worry about, right? And you trust them. But unfortunately, these young girls are so vulnerable.
Yes.
They're so vulnerable with not understanding even what's happening to them, and they're preyed upon. And before you know it, really, after the first time it happens, then it becomes sort of easier for it to continue. And it's horrible and sickening, and it happens. And that's what I'm talking about, is actually knowing and interfacing with everyone your child interfaces with to at least reduce the possibility of something like that.
Excellent. Final words before I let you go, because I could talk to you for 24/7, 365. Jen Coffindaffer, what do you have to say before I have to let you? I keep saying I'm going to let you go, and then I'm like, what do you have to say, Jen Coffindaffer? Because I so enjoy, you do such a good job, Jen. You really do. You really are a warrior. I mean, keeping kids like Sebastian Rogers at the forefront, following up with these different cases, giving us food for thought, right? So we can critically analyze or do more investigation on our own, or I'll look at your stuff and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Let me keep on that. Let me look at that a little more. Give us some final words.
Just the only word I could say is for your listeners, and I know there are many, and I bet you have an amazing audience, but use their platforms too. It proliferates. So if you hear about a story, let's just say Sebastian Rogers, it doesn't take a second to once a week show his face, talk about his name, missing, Tennessee, Hendersonville, and you've done something that you have really proliferated somebody who might see and say, wow, I think I saw a kid that looked like that at the Walmart back at that time. Yes. Or something. And that's literally what happens more often than you might think. So that's my only 2 cents, is to please everybody's voice, whether you have 5 followers or thousands of followers, your voice is important.
Well, Jen, we have to speak more frequently because, crime never takes a holiday, and neither does Jen Coffindaffer. I'll have all the information in the body of the video. Break the case with Jen Coffindaffer FBI. Also, everything about your ex. I'm urging everybody to follow because you put out so much great information on a daily basis. And you're also justice and legal expert. Well, what is your title on News Nation? Justice and law. What kind of fancy title did they give you there?
Yeah, law and justice contributor.
See, I was close. Law and justice contributor on News Nation, everybody. Jen, please let us speak again soon. Thank you so much for joining the Warriors today. I'm going to tell you again, you are indeed a warrior. Thank you.
Thank you.